Hello everybody. Coach Floyd here again. Going to be talking about lesson 5 of JavaScript and graphics. Now this one is a little bit more involved. Things start getting a little bit harder because we're using a little bit more math. But as long as you read, take your time, and really think about it, I think you'll be fine. I'm going to give you several hints as how to go through this. So if you follow along with me, you'll be all right. Okay, so graphics. In CodeHS we have what we've been seeing as the console where our words pop up. They also switch that in some of the cases into a canvas for graphics, and that's what we're going to be working with today. So this is what your canvas looks like. It's the exact same thing as the console, except we're not typing to it, we're actually showing graphics. It is based on a coordinate system. It's very similar to the axis in X and Y axis in regular math class. However, for this one, 0, 0 is at the top left corner instead of the bottom left corner. So X is still always increasing as it goes to the right. However, this is different from math class for the Y. Y increases as it goes down. Okay, so normally if you're graphing something on a graphing calculator, anything like that, your Y increases up. However, on this one, Y increases down. Okay, so very, very, very important to make sure you remember that as you move forward. So here's an example of coordinate system 100, 200. So it goes to the right 100, X always comes first, just like in math class, and then we go down 200. Okay. There's another example where X goes over 200 and it stays on 0 for Y, so it's on the top of the line. Okay, so it's always XY, excuse me, and Y always increases going down. Now here's a function call that you will use a lot. Okay, we'll use this a lot. Get width with a capital W, and it has to have open and close parentheses after the end of it. What this does is it acts as a variable. If you type in get width with the open and close parentheses, what it does is it returns to you the actual number of pixels that the screen is, that the canvas is in the X direction. Okay. Normally they're set, however, depending on, you can change the size of these canvases, so you need to use a general term, and that's what this is for. So get width, if you wanted to get half of the width, then it would be get width, open and close parenthesis, divided by 2. And let the computer do the math for you. Don't guess at numbers. You don't ever want to guess at numbers. You want it to be the same. By putting get width, or get width divided by 2, say, if I wanted to know the exact middle of any canvas, no matter what size, then get width divided by 2 would do that for me. But if I was just trying to guess, and maybe this one's 200 pixels, maybe that one's 300 pixels, I don't want to do that. Okay, so get width gets the width of the canvas. The function get height does the exact same thing, except it tells you the number of pixels tall the canvas is. Okay, so get height gives you the height of the canvas. So we always want to go get width, get height, and that will tell you what you get, what you need. Okay, make sure it's capital H, and you always have to have the open and close parentheses after it. The reason is it is a function that returns, and we'll talk about functions later, but when you make a function call, you have to have the open and close parentheses. So we've been putting hello world on the screen as just a piece of text in our console with a print line. However, in a graphics canvas we can do this, but we have to create a text box and put the words inside of it. Okay, so even though this looks, it's just words on a console, it is actually a graphic that is holding words. So let's talk about that. In our start function, there are several pieces of information we have to give to create a text box. We have to create a variable, and they have chosen the name of the variable to be text. So var text. Now here's the part that is what you're doing is you are creating a new text box. So var text equals new, the keyword new, all lowercase. When you type that into your editor, it will turn a different color because it is a keyword. And you are creating a new text. Text with a capital T. Now remember, JavaScript is case sensitive, so var text and new text, even though it's the same word, because of the capitalization, they are different. So text with a capital T represents a class. That is something I teach in coding 2. So you just get to use it. You don't have to worry about how to make it. What comes next is very similar to what we do in a print line, is we put the words that we want to show up in quotation marks. Okay, so that's the words we want to show up in our graphics canvas. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to access attributes to the object text, right? So again, we'll get to that terminology later. All you need to know is you are going to use the variable name, lowercase txt or text, and you're going to use dot notation. So dot, and then a set position. Set position is a built-in feature of the text with a capital T class, and what it does is it sets the position of the graphic. So text dot set position, and then I give it an x and y coordinate. So this puts it at 100, 100. Now with a text box, the bottom left-hand corner of the text box is what gets put at that position. Okay, so very, very, very important to understand what corner of the box is placed where. And then to finish off, we have to add the text. So we have to add our variable to the screen. So add, and then put in parentheses what you're wanting to add. And by doing that, well, you're going to get a text box that says hello world that looks just like this. Okay? Alright, so now we're going to make a blue circle. And I'm going to show you also that you can access a cheat sheet for all of these. So I'll show you that in a minute. So let's make a blue circle. We have 4 main lines of code. And it's the same thing with the text box. We usually use 4 lines of code. However, since you weren't changing the color on that one, you didn't do the color. So on this one, we're going to create a circle. So var circle, that's our variable name. You could call it circle 1, you could call it blue circle, you could call it anything you want. Just keep it simple. Var circle equals a new circle with a capital C. And the number that gets put right here with the circle, okay, so this number is the radius of the circle, not the diameter, the radius. Okay, so half of the circle gets put there. If I want a circle with a diameter of 100, make sure you put a 50 in there. Okay, then I'm going to use attributes to the circle. So circle.setColor, I'm going to give it a color. Now, this right here, CodeHS has built this for you by using a capital C on color. I can do color.blue, green, pink, red, yellow. There's a whole bunch of colors that I can type in. Okay, and there's a way to find all of them. However, we will just use the basic colors. So typing it in just like this. So I'm setting the color to this color. Okay, color.blue gives me the blue. If I put color.green, I am accessing the color through this color class. So make sure you put it in just like that. Then I'm going to circle.setPosition. I'm going to set the position at 150. So that is 100 pixels to the right, 50 pixels down. And with a circle, the center of the circle is what is placed at the position. Okay, so it's a little bit different than a rectangle or a text box or anything like that. I'm centering the circle on whatever position I tell it to be at. Okay, and that is very important, and we'll see that later. And the last thing I always do is add the circle. If I forget to type in add circle, what it does is my circle is created and it is there, it's just not showing on the screen. So I have to add the circle in order to make it pop up on the screen. So here's an example showing that blue circle centered at 150. And the last shape we're going to talk about is rectangles. Okay, so we're going to make a rectangle, and rectangles also make squares because squares are rectangles, rectangles aren't squares, if you like geometry. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to create a variable. This one is called redRect. Now, you can name this whatever you want to. However, of course, you want to be descriptive. So redRect, you could call red rectangle, you could call it anything, as long as you start at lowercase. And that is going to be a new rectangle with a capital R. Now for this, I have to give the width that I want the rectangle to be, and I have to give the height that I want the rectangle to be. So if I go back, this rectangle right here is 100 pixels long and 50 pixels tall. Okay. Now I'm going to add, so that creates my rectangle. Okay, so now I'm going to give it an attribute. I'm going to set the position of it to 60, 150. Now, a rectangle, unlike a text box, is the point in the top left corner is placed at this. Okay, so with a text box, it was the bottom left corner. With a rectangle, it's the top left corner. Couldn't make it easy on us and keep it the same, but got to make sure you remember that. So the top left corner is where you want it to be. Then I'm going to set the color. Again, do a capital C on color, color.red, and then I'm going to add my rectangle variable to the screen. All right, and so this is what it looks like. Width of 150, and shows you that this line of code created it. Then this line of code placed it, top left corner, placed it at 6150, and then we of course set the color and added it. So again, this is just a general how to make a circle. You create it right here, you put in the radius, you set its position, you would set its color. If you don't put a set color on anything, then it automatically defaults to black. Okay, so if I did, created the circle, set its position, and added it to the screen, then a black circle will pop up on the screen, which is totally fine if that's what you are asked to use. But if you're asked to make it a color, of course you want to do that. Same thing with the rectangles. It's the generic version of it. Create a rectangle variable, make a new rectangle, give it a width, a height, set its position at the X, at the Y, and then add it to the screen. And same thing for text. We talked about that. All right, so let's look at some examples real quick. Over here. So here's the hello world, and what I have done, let me show you these docs real quick. So in my docs, this is our cheat sheet. These are links to all the stuff down through here. Okay, so what I'm looking for is in my graphics, I am looking for a text. Okay, so click on text, and now it shows me to make a graphical text. Here's what I have to do to set its position. Here's what I have to do. Here's an example, right? I could copy from my docs and I could paste it over here. Make sure my indentation is good. And now I would have, if I run code, I would have two text boxes. However, they are right on top of each other. Okay. Or actually, I didn't add this one to the screen. If I add txt to the screen, now they're on top of each other, except they're different fonts, and you can see one is black and one is blue. Okay. 30-point Arial, which is what's set up in the doc, is usually a perfectly fine. If you want to change, I put a Comic Sans right here, just testing it out. There's a lot of fonts that are allowed. Some of them may not be recognized. You can play around with it. You could also Google what fonts does CodeHS have and play around with that if that's something you would like to do. Okay. So take that off, rerun it again, and there's my text. Okay, so I created a variable, I created a new text box, I told it what I wanted it to say, I told it what font and how big I wanted it to be. If I change that to 15, then it changes the size of the font. Okay. So getting the setup down, getting those 3 to 4 main lines of code for each of these is super important. So here's an example of a circle. I'm creating a circle of radius 120, so this will be a pretty big circle. I'm setting the position at get width divided by 2. Well, remember, get width divided by 2 is the center of the canvas, as well as get height divided by 2. So what I'm doing is I'm telling it I want to center the circle on this canvas. So when I run it, it's perfectly centered no matter what. I'm not guessing at numbers of pixels. I'm not trying to say, well, maybe, guess and check, put it at 100. Well, that's not quite enough. Let's do 200 and see where, we don't have to do that. We can use our get width and our get height, and we can just divide it by 2 as we go. Okay? With a rectangle, I've changed some things in here. So if I run, this, what I'm doing, I've got a rectangle. It is this size. I'm centering it. I'm making it red, and I'm adding it to the screen. So this should be centered on the screen, right? But when I run it, it's off. So remember, a circle, the center of the circle gets centered. But with a rectangle, the position goes to the top left corner. So this spot right here in the top left corner, that is perfectly centered on the screen. If you needed to move that some, then you can just keep adding on to the math. So if I wanted to subtract a certain number of pixels to move it over, then I can do that. So say I wanted to perfectly center the middle of the rectangle. I could subtract half of the width of the rectangle. Well, the rectangle width is 150, so I'm going to subtract half of that. So when I run it, now I have moved it over, and now the exact center of the rectangle is centered. And I can do the exact same thing here. I can go subtract 60 divided by 2. And you don't have to write, the division. You can actually do the math if you'd like. And there we go. Okay? So now my rectangle is perfectly centered. The center of the rectangle is now centered. Okay? So you do have to move it around a little bit to get it where you want it. And we'll do that more with in our animations unit. Okay? The 8 ball right here, this just shows that you can put things on top of other things. So what I'm going to do is I'm creating a ball, which is a new circle. Remember, I can call this anything I want. So I'm creating a new circle. What I've done here is instead of putting get width divided by 2, get height divided by 2, and here, I stored them in variables, and then I put the variable names in here. Remember, everybody codes different. You can do it however you want to. If you just want to shortcut it, or if you want to create variables, it is up to you. So it's going to be a black ball because I'm not setting a color. Then I'm creating a number, which is a piece of text. It is going to display an 8. I did a set font. I could have just done a comma up here and do this. Again, if you look in your docs, you will see several ways to accomplish things. There's usually not just one way. I'm setting the color to white because I want a white number on a black pool ball. And then I'm going to set the position to be the center X, which is the center of the ball, center Y, and then I'll move it a little bit and just to center it up. And we'll talk about that more when we get into our animation unit about moving text box. Okay, so now you can see that the 8 is right in the middle of the circle. So let's look at the 2 exercises for today. You should draw the flag of the Netherlands. The top third of the canvas is red, the middle third is white, and the bottom third is blue, as shown below. We will use rectangle objects in this program. Alright, so because the background is already white, you don't have to make a white rectangle. You just need to make a red one and a blue one. So this is what it should look like. So you should make a rectangle that is the width of the screen and is a third of the height of the screen. So you need to divide by 3. Then you need to place this top rectangle, remember, up here. Then you're going to create a second rectangle. Now you never want to name variables the same thing. Name this one red rectangle. Name this one blue rectangle. Name this red. Name this blue. Name this top. Name this bottom. Whatever you want to name it. Just make sure that they are different. Okay. The blue rectangle, again, is the width of the screen. is a third of the height of the screen, and it starts right here. Well, how far down the screen is that? If this takes up 1/3 of the screen, and this takes up 1/3 of the screen, then I'm starting 2/3 down the screen. Okay? Well, how do you multiply by 2/3? Just that. You multiply however much you need. So if I'm trying to find 2/3 of the height of the screen, then I'm going to multiply the height, the total height, by 2/3. Okay? And again, you can, if you put your 2/3 in parentheses, times, parentheses, 2/3, the computer will do order of operations for you. It'll do all the math for you. You set it up, let it do the math. Okay? So you're going to have two rectangle objects. The hard part on here is just making sure that you're not using numbers. Okay? You are using variables. Get width. Do get width divided by 2, get width divided by 3, get width times a third, that kind of stuff. I don't want to say, well, it looks like it's about 500 pixels and I need to divide that by 3. Don't use that. Use your get width and your get height. For your snowman, this program should draw a snowman. The snowman should have 3 sections. Bottom snowball with radius, bottom radius, middle snowball, and I'll show you what all those mean here in just a minute. The circle should be gray, and you can set the color using color.gray. The snowman should be centered horizontally in the world and should be sitting on the bottom of the canvas. Hint, you will need to use get height. Not just get height, you'll use get width as well. Use the variables instead of hard-coded values to create your snowman. If you're feeling adventurous, add an hat or eyes. You don't have to do that, but if you want to. So this is what it looks like. You can see it's barely touching the bottom. This one's barely touching this one. This one's barely touching this one. So let's look. So in here you have 3 constant variables that they have given you. At no time throughout this program should you type in the number 100. So when you're writing your code down here, you should not put 100 at any time. However, you can use this. And you should use the bottom radius variable name a lot through this. You should use the mid radius variable name a lot through this, top radius, okay? So the first thing you want to do is you're going to make 3 circles, okay? You're going to make a bottom circle, a middle circle, and a top circle. Make sure those variable names are separate. Okay, call one bottom, call one mid, call one top. Your bottom one, when you make it, use this variable name down here to set your radius. Okay? Now, it told you in the assignment over here that to set it on the bottom of the canvas, you will need to use get height. Now, remember, when I put the circle, the height of the circle, the positioning height at get height, it's going to put half of that circle off the screen because it's putting the center of the circle at the bottom. So I need to start at get height and then I need to subtract it by some. Okay? So if I have half of my circle off the screen and I need to get half my circle back on the screen, then I would need to subtract it by half of the circle. Well, half of a circle is my radius. I have a variable that is telling me how big the radius is. So to start this, I'm going to create a big circle, set the color to gray, and then I'm going to set the position, and I want the X to be the center of the screen. And X, remember, is our get width. How do we find half of the width? Okay, to find the center. And that's going to be the same. The X is going to be the same for all of them. I want my Y to start with get. I'm going to come down here to start with get height, then subtract using the constant variables to properly position the circle. Okay, so that's what I'm wanting to make sure I do. So when I say set position, I'll open my parentheses. I'm going to tell it, how do I find half of the x? Well, we talked about that a second ago over here in the circle. How did I find half of my width? Right. And then we talked about over here, I could start with something. So say I started here. Again, I wrote get height, and then I'm subtracting. Now, right here, I use numbers because I don't have variables holding these numbers. But over here, I do have variable names. And the reason to use the variable names is so that at any time during the you write your program, and then I say, all right, I want to change this to bottom radius equals 200, mid radius equals 120, top radius equals 60. Well, you change those numbers one time, hit run, and your program is still perfect. Okay, it's still proportional, still sitting on the bottom, all these things. Okay, so that's it for today. Remember to check out the vocab, study it, and I will see you tomorrow. If you need help, let me know. Thank you.